Hey, beady friends. It is Meredith from Beadalon and Artistic Wire. Welcome to my studio. Welcome to class today. Today we are going to be making a really fun, funky, deceptively easy bracelet using beads in the color of the chakra. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means, about what the chakra is, but also feel free to, as with almost all of my projects, substitute whatever beads you have. This is a great stash busting project as well, because it only takes, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, give or take, beads. So I don't know about you all, but I certainly have 14 mismatched beads that could be very happy to be gathered together on a bracelet. So let's see. Trying to think if there's anything else that I need to make an announcement about, but I don't think so. I think let's just get right down into that project, Felicia. I introduced myself. I'm Meredith Roddy from Beadalon and Artistic Wire, and we are making a really fun twisted chakra bracelet today. So for our project today, I am using these dyed quartz multicolor faceted 8mm beads. And I love that they are in this rainbow color. So your rainbow color could represent something different, right? It doesn't have to necessarily represent the different colors of the chakra. Is it 7? I want to make sure that I'm getting the right. Yes, the 7 main chakras. It could represent pride. It could represent a beautiful day. Or, as I mentioned before, you can feel free to substitute shape, you can substitute size, you can substitute color. We're going to learn the technique, and you can substitute out any beads that suit your fancy. And I have made this with all different colors of wire, everything. So the base of our bracelet today is made with 16 gauge wire. And as we're going along, as we're getting started, I'm going to talk about, again, it's a common theme in my classes, substitutions. So I will be using 16 gauge silver wire. I might go for the tarnish resistant brass. We'll see how it goes. Excuse me. If you only had some 18 gauge wire in your stash, that would work also for this project. 18 gauge is a fabulous gauge of wire to do this with. So we'll talk a little bit more about what I mean when I say over and over again that pesky word gauge, and we'll go from there. To do my wrapping on this project, I have wrapped these beads on. I'm using 22 gauge. If you don't have 22 gauge in your stash, 24 gauge will work fantastically. If you have some random 26 gauge wire in your stash that you have left over from another project, or maybe you bought it with an idea in mind, 26 gauge will work as well. So substitutions are the name of the game today. And each of those substitutions will yield a slightly different look, right? If we're using a thicker wire, it's going to be a more substantial bracelet. If we're using a thinner wire, it will be a more delicate bracelet. Keeping in mind that the thicker the wire that you use, the harder that's going to be on your fingers, right? So lots of different considerations for the materials that we use. And I would hope that that would be a good thing another good takeaway from our class today, is thinking about how the materials that we choose affect not only the design, but also the wear and tear on our joints and on our fingers and on our muscles, because you can oftentimes achieve a very similar look, but without making it so hard on yourself. So wires. Lastly, we are going to need a tool for this project. And for this, I am using the Artistic Wire Coiling Gizmo. I'm going to show how to get this all set up. It's super easy and fun to use. And we are going to be using it in a certain way today to make our bracelet, but you can see some more traditional designs that this tool inspires. I've used coil beaded beads, coiled beaded beads. And if you go back in the archives on the Michael's YouTube channel, you can find, oh gosh, it must have been one of the very first projects that I did as part of the community classroom. And I did a really fun pink bracelet with a silver coil. That's still one of my favorite projects that I've done from the Michael's community classroom. And I love that you can go back and watch the classes over and over again, including this one. So as I am getting started and set up, you know, if you have been with me a lot, you know that I love to know if this is your first class with me or if you have been here a lot. So please let me know in the comments, which one is it? Have you been a regular in the classes that that Beadalon has done for the Michael's community classroom, or is this your first class with me? So I'm just going to move my camera back a little ways, and you can see Finn is coming out from underneath the table. There's no real good way of showing this except to get my knees in frame. That's a little bit better. Good boy, Finn. He always likes coming to say hello. So the tool comes with this bracket, a U bracket, if you will. And I just use a piece of wood. This is a really nice piece of walnut that my dad finished off for me. You can use a desk. You could use a table. I use this piece of wood here, both so that I can move it in and out easily, but my tabletop is glass. I have a bunch of Hazarai going on here, but right here underneath, this is glass. And so I don't want to screw this in to the glass. So let me give myself a little bit more room. I'm going to just slide that right onto that piece of wood and back here again. And let's try tightening it up, Meredith, instead of loosening it. I'm fully not paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm reading the comments. So let's get our head back in the game, shall we? Okay, so I'm setting up my coiling gizmo, and you can see in the coiling gizmo, there are 4 holes right here. 1, 2, 3, 4 holes. And each of those holes will house one of the 5 brackets that come with the tool. I realized that I said 3 or 5 and I'm only showing 3. There are the other 2. So there are 5 of these brackets, and I want to get this right. So where do we say what the sizes are? I know it's here someplace. Maybe it's not on. Well, that's not helpful. Yvette can post in the comments what the exact sizes of these brackets are. Apologies. And again, if you do have any other questions, Yvette from Beadalon is here to help answer them. And please feel free to post anything in the comments that you have a question about. Okay, so the biggest rod fits in that top bracket here. And a very good question has come up in the chat, why 5 rods and 4 holes? I don't know exactly the answer to that, except that the 2 smallest fit in this bottom hole. So you don't necessarily need the 5 holes. Fair question. I don't know the exact answer, but I do know that it works with all of them. And the 5 rods are 4.5 millimeters, 4 millimeters, 3 millimeters, 1.5 millimeters, and 1 millimeter. So there are lots of different things that this tool is great for, but today we are showing it with the coiled bracelet. I just want to make sure that my camera is at a really, really good angle. So I am using this artistic wire. Now, just really, really quickly, because I always like to give a little reminder about artistic wire. When you're in Michael's, you'll see 2 different kinds of wire. There's artistic wire, and then there's German style wire. Now, artistic wire is a dead soft wire. So once you start going into this thick wire, it is a lot easier to turn it if it is a dead soft wire. Because what ends up happening as you go through these turns is something called work hardening. And you'll see once we get to the shaping it into a cuff portion of our class today, just how much that work hardens by being twisted and going back and forth numerous times. And what work hardening means is as those little molecules of wire are dancing around within the wire, when they get work hardened, they start dancing slower and slower and slower. And so it makes it much, it makes it harder to bend. Now, one of the challenges that I'm going to talk about overcoming is we only have a finite amount of room here with the tool. If you need to make this bracelet larger, if you need the cuff to be larger, there are a couple of different ways that you can do that. The first I would recommend is actually to use a different tool that has a longer mandrel. The second is to find a longer mandrel, or what you could do is take one of the smaller or the thinner mandrels and tape like a knitting needle or another dowel, somehow kind of jerry rig it so that you have a little bit more surface area to do your coil. So again, some limitations to this specific tool. The technique will be the same, but there are definitely ways to kind of MacGyver it to make for a longer bracelet. I think that is all that I wanted to say about wire, except to recommend that we have in the archives on the Michael's YouTube channel, really good all-encompassing videos that go over top to bottom everything about wire gauges, about hardness, about work hardening, about what wire that you want to use with what technique. So I definitely recommend after class today going ahead and watching those videos to really get a good sense of what I'm talking about. So what I've done here is I've just wrapped this around this loop part here. Nothing fancy. This is going to be cut out or cut off. And the great thing about this cuff is that A, it's adjustable, and B, it is, it's the word I'm looking for. You can make it bigger or smaller. So what I'm doing right today will fit my wrist. I have a generally a smaller wrist. I always say wrist size is not indicative of person size, but this cuff fits me really nicely. It's not going anywhere. And I have about a 6 3/4 inch wrist now that through COVID used to be a little smaller. This is my COVID wrist. But again, wrist size is not indicative of person size. So that's about what fits me really nicely. And I try when I'm designing jewelry to make things that will fit all wrist sizes, because we're different size people. We have different sizes of wrists. So the mechanics of this tool are almost too simple. All I'm going to do is hold the wire with my thumb and bounce my camera. Let me see if I can bring that back just a little bit so I don't hit it too much. Let's try that. That's still a pretty good view, right? Pretty good angle. I'm going to rotate this with my hand here while holding this in place. Now, I'm not making coils though, right? I'm not making a coiled bead or a coiled bracelet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it out. So I have these nice, messy, asymmetrical, and yet still nicely formed coils. So enough talking, let's just do. So I'm just going to, and I find that because I'm using pretty significant wire, I do need to use more of a twisting motion with my thumb and my forefinger rather than just a cranking. And I go nice and slow because 16 gauge wire is no joke. And I'm going to pull this out here, see both what you're seeing and what I'm seeing. Make sure we all see that nicely. And just move that out of the way. that out of the way. Make sure we have a nice frame here. And you can see I'm actually pulling this out to the end. So I'm only going to use this tool in that way in the very beginning. Because now what I need to do, because I need that extra bit of length, is I need to go all the way to the bottom of my tool. Okay, or all the way to the end of the rod is a better way of saying that. Okay, so now I'm going to come back this way. And I'm just twisting over here and making sure that the wire is, I'm pulling it out when I need a little bit more. I'm just making sure that the wire is fitting over itself in these grooves. Am I making it perfect? No, because all that's going to do is drive me crazy because it's almost impossible to make it perfect. And you don't really need it to be perfect. And then I'm going to come back over this way. And this rod is 7 inches. 6 3/4 inches. 6 3/4 inches. So I'm going to keep going. And so now this is my third pass. And now this is the time that my wire, I pulled out a little bit too much, so it's going to go crazy. Let's see how many things in the studio I can pick up with the wire. And this is where at the end here, where if I had kind of jerry-rigged something to make it a little bit longer, if I needed to, I would keep going over that. Really, I'm using this rod as a mandrel to create my spirals, twists, helixes, what should we call these? So now I've gone through, so 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And if I wanted to do 5, if I had enough wire left for that, I could. I kind of like 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is actually 5 times. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to come back down to the bottom. And I believe that from one package of 16 gauge wire, that is, I want to make sure that I get my info correct. 5. No, this is 3 meters. So this will yield you 2 of these bracelets. So this one I had made my example out of. And so now I have enough left for another one. So that's always good to know, right? How many bracelets can I make from one package? So I'm going to come back down here. And now I need to cut my end of my wire, but I'm actually going to wait to do that. Let me put this to the side and reset myself back up in frame. All right, now we can work. Now we can do some work. Okay, so I'm going to, the first thing I need to do is snip this off from the end here. And I'm using pretty heavy duty cutters to do that. The other tool that is great for doing that job are the memory wire cutters. And because of the nature of wire, and we just put a lot of tension onto this wire and onto the rod, I like to just give it a little twist as I'm pulling it off. Nice and slow. And it's coming. But just nice and slow twist. Because again, that work hardening of the wire, it's also heating up. Lots of different kind of chemical things are happening to this wire. What you can also do here is pull it out a little. I think that would work better if you were using 18 gauge wire. I don't have the strength to be able to pull this out to make it longer, but that is another really good technique to enlarge or I keep seeing the word embiggen everywhere now, your wire. So I like to finish this end with a loop. So I'm going to go ahead and use my round nose pliers and just pull that over into a loop. Because what I can do is use that loop for a number of different things, right? This doesn't necessarily have to be just a cuff. I could pull this out and actually make a beaded strand here. That would be another really good way to make this cuff part a little bit longer. You could even tie a piece of elasticity or stretch cord, one on one end and one on the other, or a little piece of leather or some beads. Or a gazillion, so many, well, maybe not a gazillion, but lots of different ideas that if you needed a bigger bracelet, we can just pull, kind of already have this in shape, but you could pull this out and then use those loops. You could use a ribbon. I love thinking about all of the different possibilities. But here, what I'm going to do is, again, it's my memory wire cutter. I want to show that it works really, really well with this 16 gauge wire. I'm going to come in with my memory wire cutter. And remember, memory wire cutters can cut other things, but you only cut memory wire with a memory wire cutter. I love how these work on this nice, thick, heavy wire. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a loop as well. And the name of the game on this bracelet is a really organic design. So not thinking about making sure that my loops are perfect. But again, use this as an inspiration and you do you. All right, so I just want to make sure that I am following along in the right order that I wrote the instructions. Sometimes I go a little off book, but I want to make sure that we're staying here. So there are a couple of different ways now to turn something that is straight into something that is curved. The easiest tools to use are your fingers. And again, this is where that using that 16 gauge wire can get a little intense, but we're going to take it nice and slow. We are going to just warm that wire in our hands and bring those sides together. If you have a jar, you could use a jar to do this. If you have a mandrel is a great tool to get this started. There are lots of different ways to do this, but sometimes the easiest one is just to use our fingers. So for anyone who doesn't know what a memory wire cutter and or memory wire is if you imagine a slinky, it's wire that is going to hold its shape. And I actually have a memory wire bracelet right here behind me, conveniently enough. You'll probably see a lot of these in wherever it is that you find your jewelry. That is memory wire. And again, slow and steady. I'm using really small incremental movements to get this bracelet around in the shape that I want it to be in. But the thing about memory wire is because it's carbon steel, it holds its shape, but it's also very, very strong and heavy duty, even more so than this 16 gauge work hardened wire. And just by way of comparison, you can see how much I'm struggling to get this in shape, right? This is the original 16 gauge wire. I can bend this no problem, but because there are five layers that have been work hardened, once you get this into shape, it's a really good cuff. So for those of my students who are joining me live, I'm curious, do you wear cuff bracelets? I'm more of a closed bracelet kind of gal, but I know that there are lots of different designs and lots of different people who like to wear cuff bracelets. I'm just curious, while I'm getting the next step ready, what your thoughts are. Do you like wearing cuff bracelets? Do you not like wearing cuff bracelets? Just curious. Okay, so now what we're going to do, and because this is a chakra bracelet, I want to mention as I am stringing up each of the design, what each of these colors represent. So as I am doing that, I am going to start by cutting a 2 foot length of 22 gauge wire. So 2 feet is probably just about what you need. If you want a little bit more, cut a little bit more. If you want to cut a little bit less, you might have to add some, and that's totally okay. So to do this project, kind of the way that I designed it, 22 gauge is a really good place to start. I find that once you start moving into 24 gauge, it can be a little too soft for a beginner to work with. And then 20 gauge for our purposes right here is going to be a little bit too hard. So 22 gauge is a nice sweet spot, but if you're comfortable with wire and working with wire, I would suggest a 24 or even a 26 gauge wire would be good. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm using the nylon jaw pliers and I'm straightening this wire out. You could also use, I brought it out because I never show it, the artistic wire straightener. So this is also at Michael's. You might have seen it in the beading aisle or where the tools are and thought to yourself, what is that crazy little gadget? This is actually really good for straightening out wire that's a little bit heavier duty. And this is how this works, just to show you really quickly. You hold it in the palm of your hand. Let's actually watch what we're doing, Meredith. And pull it through. And it straightens the wire out really, really nicely. So turn your wire around. Sometimes it takes a couple of passes. I also find that, especially on a short piece like this, holding on to the end with another pliers is really helpful. And there we go. That wire nice and straight. Okay, so usually if I'm using 18 gauge wire or thicker, I'll use the artistic wire straightener to straighten that wire. If I'm using wire that's thinner, like this 22 gauge wire that I'm using right now, I'll run it with the nylon jaw pliers. I'm just going to lay this down on my measuring device here and snip my piece. So I've got this 2 foot length of 22 gauge wire. I'm going to give that whole thing a really nice straighten. And let's see. What I'm going to do is now I'm really using this 22 gauge wire to weave the beads onto my bracelet. And it did take me a little while to figure out the spacing. And so since I have a guide, it makes it a lot easier for me to see where I want to place those wraps. But if you can see, what I've done is I've secured my wire, I've put on my chakra bead, and then I've wrapped that wire around twice. And I've continued with that pattern the whole way around. Okay, so that's where we're going. So first things first, let's go ahead and secure the tip or the end of that wire. And for this, I like to use my bent chain nose pliers because I can get them, oh, sorry guys, get them nice and in to the crevices. Bear with me for 1 second. There we go. So I'm just going to pull that around, and I'm doing it with the tail. I find it easier in the beginning just to do it with the tail. If you find it easier to pull that whole wire through, that works too. You just want to be, again, that pesky little word, work hardening, comes up over and over again when we are talking about working with wire. The more times you apply any kind of pressure, of working with the wire, it's going to make it harder. And why that matters, especially for something like a 22 gauge wire, is that eventually it will start becoming brittle. So you don't want your wire to break. So it's all kind of a guessing, not a guessing game, a balancing act of whether or not you're over work hardening it or work hardening it just enough. Okay, so it looks like, for whatever reason on the instructions, I went backwards on my chakra. I don't know if that's bad juju, but I want to start here with red bead, probably because when yeah, you know why? This is really funny. This is exactly why I did it. Because when I cut this off of the card, I cut it here, and purple is first. So that's why I started with the purple. I saw the instructions, I was like, why in the world would I have started with purple? But that's 100% why. All right, so my 22 gauge wire is attached to my 16 gauge wire, and I am going to add my first bead, and this is the root chakra. The meaning of the red chakra is your physical identity, your stability, your grounding. It's right in the base of your spine in the tailbone area. So I'm a pretty spiritual person. I can certainly use all the help that I can get in terms of keeping my spirit healthy and happy. So depending on your beliefs and where you stand, this could be a very meaningful bracelet or just a very beautiful bracelet. And Susie has added a very helpful comment for all of us, both in people who are watching me live, but also in the replay on the Michael's YouTube channel, is a size 6 knitting needle is the closest size to the largest rod on the mandrel. So a size 6 knitting needle would be a really good place to start. Now I just wrapped that around twice. And if you were feeling a little neater than not, you could take those chain nose pliers, those bent chain nose pliers, and just pull that spiral together to make it a little bit neater, if that was your inclination or your intention. So I did double up the colors here, and there are 3 of each. So I have my one left over, but now I need to cut this apart, and I'll cut it at the top, so I'm going in the right direction. Isn't that funny how something that you would not think would inform how you're doing your design makes such a difference. So I'm just eyeballing this. I could nestle it in right here or right here. I think I'm going to try to nestle it right here. So this is going to be a little bit of guesswork for how to get your beads spaced correctly. And again, I have my cheat sheet, my cheat bracelet over here, so that I can gauge where I am going. But what you could do, I'm going to pop this up just a little bit so you can see a little bit better what I'm doing, and so that I have a little bit more clearance. You could draw this out on a little piece of paper and then cut it up into sections. So you would need it in 14 sections. There are 14 beads. So then you could know where you want to put those beads on as you are going. All right, so now 1, 2, now it's time for orange. And I love the idea of this as a chakra bracelet. The orange is the sacral chakra, which falls on our bodies just below the belly button. And the sacral chakra is all about pleasure and creativity. So that's one that fits with us creative beaders really, really well, right? But I also like this as a design for pride. I feel, especially, I believe yesterday was an important day for coming out. And this would be a wonderful bracelet to show in support or in part of an identity. So lots of different things that a rainbow can represent. And I love the idea of both. So now I'm coming in, I'm going to use orange, and quite frankly, these are just really pretty beads. Sometimes when I am at the bead wall in Michael's, or even in my studio, those of you who have taken classes with me before have heard me talk about the beads that talk to me. They speak to me. They tell me where they want to go. They tell me which friends they want to hang out with. And these were beads when I was looking at the bead wall in Michael's that just spoke to me. They were just pretty. They were so happy. I really like the way that they're cut. And so I wasn't sure of the project that I was going to make when I purchased them. Sometimes I get things with specific projects in mind, but this was definitely something that I was like, you know what, those beads just want to come home with me. And so they're going to. And then this project came from that. So now we are in the solar plexus chakra, which is located in the body in the upper abdomen. And this is all about self-esteem and confidence. So this is one that we could all use, right? A little more confidence, a little more self-esteem. And what I'm doing is I'm eyeballing it, really. That's the best that I can say is, do I want this one back here? Is it going to look right to my eye? I don't know. Maybe over here it looks better. I'm just kind of moving this around. If I put it here, there's too much space. So for our OCD friends, this is going to be a challenging project, right? It might be a good challenge to let the wire be the guide for where you add it next. And sometimes, like here, I'm going to having a little bit of a challenge getting that wire through. I'm going to use my tool and just pull the end of the wire through. And I'm wrapping around twice. So let me show that really close up. So I'm bringing that wire around. And do I need to go twice? Probably not. I could probably get away with just doing it once. I just think it looks nicer if I wrap it around twice. So I'm not going through the bead. I am taking that tail and I am just going around that wire twice. And sometimes the wire will poke out really easily. And other times you're going to have to coax it out with your pliers. So there we go. And when I made the first example, I didn't push my coils together like this, but I'm kind of digging that. So that's where I'm going to go with that for right now. All right, so now I need another yellow. And if your tail or if your end gets a little messed up, just snip it off. Don't even worry about straightening it out, because if you do need to add some wire, you just continue in that same vein that you did in the very beginning and just wrap it around twice and then snip off the end and then keep on going, and no one will ever be able to see the difference. All right, so I'm going to continue along here. And now we are at the heart chakra. That is the green chakra. And that is located in the center of your chest, just above your heart. And the green chakra is all about love and compassion. So that is a beautiful place to spend a moment. And part of what is kind of happening to me now and might happen to you if and when you are making this bracelet yourself is I'm kind of reflecting in the back of my mind on each of these descriptions, each of these words and what they mean to me. So it can almost be a meditative experience, right? I don't know about you all, but I know, especially when I'm doing seed bead work or very repetitive beading, where I'm doing the same step over and over again, it becomes very therapeutic to me, very relaxing, very meditative. And I think that is a lot of the reason why we do these things, why we channel our creativity, is to be able to find some peace and to find some happiness and some joy. And I hope that that's why, and that doing these activities and doing this beading creates that sense for you. All right, so let's see. Next, we've got blue, which is the throat chakra. And I think that is this color here, blue, light purple, and dark purple. Oh, this is all about communication. Whew. How's everybody doing with their communicating these days? I feel like that's always something that I'm working on, is a better way of communicating with my friends, with my family, with my coworkers. It's always a challenge to communicate effectively, especially sometimes if you don't agree with the person that you're talking to, right? That's generally my biggest challenge, is sticking to my guns when the person who I'm talking with might not agree with me, right? All right, so I've now gone around that wire twice, and I'm going to continue with my throat chakra, thinking about how I can be perhaps a better communicator and also a better listener. That's always a challenge, right? Is making sure that we have our ears open when we are and we are listening when we're having a conversation with someone, not just thinking about what we are going to be saying next. And you can see how that 2 feet of wire is a really good place. I'm going to have plenty of wire to finish this off, no problem. All right, so next, the indigo, which is this color, really, really pretty color of blue. That is the third eye chakra. That one's a little, I don't know, it's a little appropriate for Halloween coming up, I feel like. Right in between your eyes, and it is all about intuition and imagination. Your third eye, your spidey sense, right? So around here and around here. And we are coming down the home stretch for sure. So I have 3 more, and I have spaced this really nicely. So those 3 beads are going to fit in just perfectly. And again, I'm letting those beads go where they want to go, and then wrapping that wire around twice. The other thing that you want to be careful of if you're using 24 gauge wire is, as it's work hardening and becoming brittle, it runs the risk of snapping when you're pulling it through like that. So again, just things to be aware of when you are working with wire. It's a wonderful medium. You can make amazing things, but just like with any craft, with any material that you are working with, anything that you make, you just have to be respectful of the materials and work within their limitations and their challenges. Now, see, this bead, for whatever reason, doesn't want to sit the way that I want it to sit. So I'm just going to take a moment and show it who's boss, which is me. Sometimes you let the beads decide where they want to go. But when you know that they are being difficult and not going where they should be going, then you can intervene and kind of give it a more forceful nudge. And always remember, use your tools. If the wire is not coming through because I'm going through kind of a tight place right there, you can just always pull it through with your pliers. And I think I've got my last bead. Oh, so right, 1, 2, 3. Forgot to talk about the purple, the violet, or the white, which is the crown chakra, which is the very top of your head. And this is about your awareness and your intelligence. So again, very therapeutic class for me today. Hopefully it has brought you some inner peace as well. It's really kind of helped put my head on straight for the rest of today's activities. And I've reached the end of my bracelet. I've come here to my last bead, And I'm just going to wrap this around one more time, just for good measure. And now I'm going to snip this off. And I think we can bring this down just a little bit more and come back for the close up. And you always want to make sure whenever you're doing any snipping of wire that you tuck your tail in. So whether that is snipping with your wrap loops or snipping with your wire here, you just always want to make sure that you tuck that tail down so it doesn't catch on anything. And now this is where you can kind of look and say, well, it's a little bit of a weird space here. So I want to come in with my pliers and just maybe close that up a little bit, maybe bend that back, maybe add some more beads, you know, maybe I want to go another pass, maybe I want to go around. There are so many ways that you can then embellish this design once you have it started. And I really like the idea of what we talked about in the very beginning of keeping this a little bit bigger. If you have a larger wrist, again, wrist size is not necessarily indicative of person size, and then using a ribbon or a piece of beading wire or a piece of elasticity or leather, so many different ways to close that circle, but keeping that really nice, let me take this one off, that really nice cuff bracelet look. There are just so many different things that you can do here on the end. And a chat just popped in the corner of my eye, dangles on the ends. Dangles are always welcome on all projects as far as I'm concerned. So thank you all so very, very much for joining me for class today. Felicia, thank you. You read my mind, my friend. Thank you so much. It's a little bit of a quicker class today, but we covered everything that we needed to, and now I have another bracelet that I can either wear or gift. If you have made this project either along with me or after the fact, please feel free to post it on your socials and use the hashtag Michael's classes, and of course, hashtag Beadalon, because we love seeing what you make with our products and with Michael's products as well. If you want to hang out with me more, you can always find me on Instagram at Meredith Joy Designs, and you can see me on Tuesdays. I'm sorry, it's not Tuesday today, it's Wednesday at 2:00 Eastern time for our Beadalon classes for the Michael's Community Classroom. And Sarah Lovecraft also teaches for us at 2 p.m. on Wednesdays on days that I'm not here, and at 1 p.m. Eastern time on some Saturdays. So thanks all, as always, for joining me for my beading today. Hopefully you took some good tips and tricks away. And until next time, happy beading.